Where did he go?
I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
All right. This open meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee Facilities Subcommittee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, in response to the COVID pandemic. Oh, the dog's going to bark. Hold on.
Marissa, leave it going in the background. That's the best part.
Okay. In the response to the COVID pandemic and enacted into law in Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and the provisions extended through March 31st, 2025 of the fiscal year 2023 supplemental budget signed by Governor Healy. These provisions suspend the requirement for the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order the meeting. Sorry, I had to run up and down the stairs. I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee Facilities Subcommittee on Wednesday, December 4th at 2:04 p.m. I'm Matthew Enders, the chair of the Facilities Subcommittee. I'd like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I say your name, please respond in the affirmative. Caitlin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Narissa?
I am here and I can hear you.
Staff, when I say your name, please respond in the affirmative. Brian?
Here and I can hear you.
Hold on.
Other Brian?
Brian Perry?
I'm here and I can hear you.
John?
Here, I can hear you.
And
Patrick,
sorry.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Alan?
Yeah.
I'm here and I can hear you.
And Town Representative Alicia?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Christine?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Neil?
Here and I can hear you.
Mike?
I'm here and I can hear you, Matt.
Thank you. For this meeting, the Triton School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district website, identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that the others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone and computer when you're not speaking. All supporting materials has been provided to members of this body are available on the district's website with the agenda posting, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote will be taken via roll call vote. All right. I don't think there's anyone from the public, right?
There is not.
Okay. So I think we're good to go. And so, hold on. I'm sorry. The first is the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from, I don't have the date in front of me. Sorry.
November 14th.
Thank you.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Roll call. Caitlin?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And moving on to the building options and the revised estimate.
I'm going to jump in here. So I want to update you on two things. The first one is a follow-up on our last meeting, and the second is new information that I have. So you remember last time when we met, we were working with a number that was more in the 150 range. Following that meeting, as we were having some discussions and John was looking at it and Brian was looking at it and we're like, I think that's a little low. And they had been going off multiple iterations between Julia and Kevin, and the HVAC was grossly underestimated. So they actually swung it, and he was then going to grossly, what I would say would be overestimate it. And we arrived at what you have here. This is not new information. I sent this all to you. Nothing's changed since, is it 2 weeks ago now? Week and a half ago that he sent this out. But the PDF that is linked there, $172,183,855 is the accurate and updated, again, conceptual plan, right? So this is one more reiteration for those who were just joining this series of meetings. This is a concept, and this was a concept designed, started off as well, if we don't get accepted by the MSBA, then what would our options be? And so that's where we went down this path. So that I don't know if there's any questions about that. I don't think there's anything really to go through in that plan. Nothing in the plan changed from what we reviewed last time, right? The actual kind of layout on pages, what is it, 4, 5, and 6? And then page 1, 2, and 3 showing, page 1 showing the overview, and then 2 and 3 showing the detailed. Again, this plan assumes a costed out or a called out assumed costs for areas that were changing, right? The library splitting it in half, reworking those spaces, the entry, what is it called? It's not a, we call it, it was a, the lobby, I think is the term used, right? So those areas are called out here separately. Everything else is assumed in a general overview or update of everything that exists. Building envelope, $17.1 million. HVAC, now it's sitting at 25 million. Electrical, just shy of 15 million. So those are just assumptions, and right, the value of this is it took us through a lot of great thinking. The downside of this is it is a concept. So between this piece of paper and a schematic design that would be costed out by an engineer after spending $1 million, $2 million on designing it, there'd be a significantly greater level of detail, significantly more confidence in the numbers. So these could be high, could be low, believe they're a good solid ballpark. So that was where we landed last time. I don't know if there were any questions about that. The goal for today was to get together and kind of talk through where we landed last time. And then the school committee, the subcommittee will make a recommendation to the full school committee about how best to proceed, depending on what we hear for next Friday. So unless there are questions, I will say the second piece of information that I have is that I didn't think I was able to say anything. I received a readiness call, and that is what I'm allowed to say publicly. I received a readiness call from the MSBA, Diane Sullivan. I forget her full title. She is the lady that you deal with for the first half of the MSBA process. So a readiness call, 2 weeks ago, I received the call, and it was a lengthy discussion, and the purpose of the call was to make sure that everything that we have, that we submitted back in, we prepared it in February, submitted it in March, everything that we had submitted is still accurate, and that we are still interested in proceeding. It was a 40-minute phone call to get that high level summary, but that is in essence what the call was. I confirm that we are still interested in proceeding. And so what I've learned is that, I will say this publicly too, because this is publicly discussed, is that if you get the readiness call, it's pretty sure bet that you're getting the real call soon thereafter in an invitation. So I cannot speak with 100% certainty that we're welcomed in. We are not welcomed in yet. And even if I get that call from Diane Sullivan saying that we need to be there at the board meeting, which is now held virtually next Friday, even then, it's not a sure thing until the MSBA board votes it. So I am expecting a call from Diane Sullivan, and the goal is on strict orders that any time of day or night or wherever I am, if it's in the middle of this meeting, you're going to see me disappear. So wherever that call happens, I will take that call from her. So that, right, it's not a sure thing, but it's certainly from folks that I've talked to that have been in the process. It sure feels like it is you only get that call if you are going to be welcomed in, and she did confirm for me that if it is she stated to me that, this is the first of 3 steps to be welcomed in. This is the readiness call, and then you would get the call welcoming you or inviting you to the meeting on December 13th, and then you would show up at the meeting, and the board would have to vote for you. She said that if it's a no, it's really a 1-step process. It's that phone call and says that where I'm telling you it's a no. So by design, the fact that I got the first phone call kind of confirms that, but they can neither confirm nor deny. So I think that certainly changes our trajectory a little bit here, in that we had spent lots of time talking about, again, initially as this was a plan B, in the what if we are not welcomed into the MSBA. The second piece of this now, or then the second piece, it kind of, as a secondary discussion, it kind of morphed into, oh, well, even if we do get welcomed into the MSBA, perhaps this plan B could become our plan A if it becomes a more cost-effective way to move forward. So, so I think that changes with the fact that we have that information and I got that readiness call. I think we have to be more than prepared to assume that we will be welcomed in. And if we are welcomed in, there's a decision to make as to whether or not this really could be a plan A. So I'll stop talking and let other people talk. I tried. No, that's not. I tried to not talk. One more clarifying point I should add. I was off on the timing. I thought that the invitation in December was the formal vote, and then there's another vote to start the 270-day or 9-month. It's called the eligibility period. So I can send you all a link if you're interested in delving into it. But the process is chunked into modules. So we're being welcomed into module 1, which is the eligibility period. We are. I'm already talking like it's a sure thing. I think we're going to be welcomed into module 1. And I really don't know. I'd tell you if I really knew. I don't know any more than that. We're welcomed into module 1, which starts a 270-day window, 9 months, for us to complete some tasks. That I thought there was another official vote to start that window. That's not the case. When we're welcomed in, if we're welcomed in on next Friday, they would set when we begin, and they phase projects that are welcomed in February through June. So in talking to Diane, she did say, if you're welcomed in, we see you as being prepared to start that process quickly. And so I would anticipate that we would be able to start that 9-month window pretty quickly. Hopefully, right? Ideally, it would be that February, which gives us time to jump right in. The majority of the tasks are not stuff that would involve other people. There's a lot of work for John to do. John and I to kind of go through these checklists and things for facilities. And there's, a lot of other kind of red tape. We certify an enrollment. The big piece is that funding, that we have to approve the funding. We have that money set aside. Again, there's just about 1.7 million in stabilization. So that money is there. That's a huge hurdle. So if we could be ready to get, if that's true and we could start in February, I think we could do that all in 5 months. Which would put us, we'd be able to get to the late June board meeting to be welcomed into feasibility, which starts the real work, right? Going out to modules 2 and 3, which is your designers, your OPM, and starting that study. I felt good about that because one of the things we keep talking about is we don't have time to do an MSBA project, right? Part of the genesis of this, looking at my other screen, that proposal was we can start that now. And so if we really are welcomed and we can get into that February start, I think there's a lot that we could do to be rolling sooner rather than later. And there's a path where we could be going out, selecting an OPM and a designer for that study by the fall, which would be really positive. So now I will stop talking.
I guess I'll have a go. So I guess for me personally, just kind of thinking through this process, I felt really good when we came out of our last meeting because I felt like we had a project that I thought was probably in a doable financial frame, especially knowing that the estimates were probably a little high, right? And would potentially come down to through the process, especially if we could start it sooner than later. And it was sort of checking all the boxes that we had brought up at the beginning of this when we started talking about security and student flow and bringing everything back inside the one single building and all of that stuff. And it sort of checked all the updates and things like that. When I got the updated numbers, I started being a little bit more concerned about that. My thought at that point was if we didn't get an MSBA invite that our choices were probably, I mean, I think we would have to start talking to the community at that point, because this is my personal belief. I don't believe there's a right number. You can have a lower number, but not be sort of checking all the boxes that the community thinks you need to check, and you still lose at the ballot box, right? Or your number can be too high and you can be checking all of those options that you need to check and you can still lose at the ballot box. Sometimes there's no winning in a situation like that. And I started to feel like we might be in that situation at the $172 million number. That was my concern. I was fortunate enough to kind of hear about this phone call a little bit earlier than this meeting. So having some time to think this through. My personal take on this is I'm kind of relieved to hear this, because I feel like it takes us out of the limbo that I felt like we were going to be in, spending a lot of time trying to solicit feedback and figure out, what was the right plan to move forward. Did we need to cut some of the things we really thought we should have in there in order to bring a number down a little bit, or, whatever was going to happen down the road. Two of the big things I was concerned about were speed. I should say three things. One was speed, which I think Brian just talked to a little bit. And I think, a lot of the work that's already been done can help us move things along faster. And that's to our credit. Like, we've already done a lot of this background work where people are starting from scratch. We won't be starting there. We'll already have a lot of that work done. So I think that's become less of a concern for me as time goes on. One of my other concerns was that when we move into feasibility, we needed to take the entire stabilization fund. And if we were in for a long project, things are going to go wrong, and we didn't have a cushion. There was no rainy day fund for us to go back to. And we know we've already had to dip into that last year. And I don't remember what was mentioned in this meeting, but we just had a not inexpensive septic issue on the campus that, it's just, it feels like there are these kind of continual unexpected big bills where we don't know that they're coming, and we need that cushion. One of the things that fortunately, having gone through the Pine Grove renovation, I remembered and double checked with Brian, was that the MSBA reimburses really quickly, and they reimburse you up to half of your feasibility. So even though the full feasibility would cost pretty much our entire stabilization fund, we'd be getting that money back from the MSBA, which would leave us with a cushion. So even if it takes longer, it's not like, if we have a $200,000 repair, that we're not going to be able to cover it, because we're going to have that rainy day fund, at least a good part of it, is still going to be there for us. And I think that was sort of comforting for me. And then, this process has been informative, and it's been what it's been, but it hasn't given us the opportunity to consider sort of the things that Patrick was talking about toward the end of last meeting. Like, let's look at all the spaces rather than just sort of our big goals in coming up with these numbers. And I think the MSBA process could also give us that option. I honestly, like, at this point, personally, again, I feel like the MSBA is a direction that we should go in. It checks a lot of those things and makes a lot of those things happen, and takes away the concerns that had started to really pop up for me with the sort of Plan B projects that we were looking at. I think it's going to take a lot of work to speed it along. I'm hopeful that they might even be willing, if Brian's having a conversation with them, to sort of work with us on what we've already done, and saying maybe we don't even have to look at some of the other options. Let's not you know, we've already looked and there are no other properties in Byfield and we can't exactly locate the campus anywhere else. So maybe we can kind of check that box because we've already been there. So I'm hopefully that they'll be willing to allow us to do that rather than making us go through that again. But I really think this is probably the best option at this point. It'll probably end up being a higher price point than the 172. But with the MSBA covering, you know, they say they cover half. So let's say, you know, in real terms, because there's always unreimbursable stuff that they're covering a third, that's probably going to put us in a better place financially. Coming back to the towns, we're going to end up, I'm guessing, with a better project. We'll have a cushion and I think we can speed it along. So it's not going to be the 7 to 9 years, I think that Brian originally gave us as an estimate, if we can kind of push things forward. So I don't know, that's kind of been my thought process over the last couple of weeks. So I just wanted to, I guess, share that because I'm not sure what Brian was looking for as feedback, but that was my feedback.
Well, I was mostly, you all need to make the decision. So I was giving you the context. I should just say on timing, what Diane said is, generally speaking, from the time people are welcomed in, which would be the December next Friday, it's generally around 3 years that projects are brought to voters at a town meeting. So if we're being welcomed in December of 24, then it would be December of 27 that we, on their kind of normal trajectory, they would expect that we'd be bringing a project to the voters. As I mentioned to you, and I talked to her for 40 minutes. We talked about the fact that she said, you know, if you're welcomed in, you're prepared, maybe get you in that early February slot. That gets us starting feasibility much sooner. Some folks who are welcomed in and start in June, their 9 months takes them through spring of 26. So if we can get that all done by summer of 25 and start feasibility by fall of 25, we would, and she kind of talked through, definitely be able to bring that back. So we could be targeting a spring 27 vote. Which would have us doing construction in late 27, early 28, which if, again, the construction here that Kevin modeled is starting June of 27 and ending June of 29. So it's only right at this point, this is part of the kind of, as we talked through the timing, and it's really only another 3 to 6 months if we can be aggressive that partnering with the MSBA provides for us. And obviously the value add of being able to rethink educational spaces and have them pay 40 to 50% of that is significant. I will say too, part of that conversation is, you know, she assessing our readiness and having a conversation around what we've done. So we talked at length about this process that we've undergone. She loved it. And she said, Brian, I will not speak about any other projects that may or may not be geographically close to you. But she said, designers will design what you want. Right? The MSBA is not going to say to you, design a Cadillac. We want to partner with you on the best, most cost-effective and efficient solution. If you just have the designers do their jam, right, you will end up with a gorgeous and really expensive building, and it may be hard to pass. So she said, if you're welcomed in, I would encourage you to not forego and look past the work that you've done. Right? The idea of a renovation, or maybe it's just a partial renovation, right? Maybe it's just, we keep the pieces that we know we would never get reimbursement on. We would never get, I think we talked about this, we would never get 2 gyms. Never. We would barely get the 1 full-size gym based on our enrollment. We'd never get an 800+ seat auditorium. So maybe those stay and get renovated, and there's a new construction built around that. So all of that, she encouraged the work of this group and saying, like, this is good, and don't lose that mindset just because if you're welcomed in, just because you say yes to a partnership with the MSBA does not mean that you need to just put all that aside. and think, okay, let's aim perfect and the Cadillac. She said, we will encourage you and be very pleased to work with you about a more reasoned approach. So. Tracker, Brian's talking again. I'll stop talking.
Brian, I would just add, I agree with both of you and Narissa a lot, but I'll go back to the golden goose. I have concerns about the golden goose.
Mhm.
We'll see. And I would, one thing I would disagree with Narissa on is there is other plots of land. It just might not be in Newbury. So there is plenty of land in all three towns. I just, I really have concerns about the golden goose.
Yep.
Every project, if I've researched everything else, it didn't go the way that people wanted to go. Very few projects that I've seen that. I mean, even look at West Newbury. I mean, Pawtucket, it was a nightmare. So, Whittier, nightmare. I mean, I have real concerns with the MSBA. I think it could help us, but we'll see. Through the process, I'm open-minded, but through the process, we'll see.
I hear that, Mike. I do. I absolutely do. We are aware, right? So even having gone through the Pine Grove project, it's a beautiful building. There are things now, having gone through it, that we would have said, maybe not maple ceilings and tile in the halls instead, right? So I think a lot of beautiful design things that ended up happening that, right, when we establish a building committee, we will have a very transparent process. And I am confident that that process will not yield, it's called a preferred schematic, right? So we're welcomed in, we get to that phase. That is going to be heavily influenced by building committee. That is going to include town officials from our three towns, school committee members. If you look, I will just say, look at the composition of building committees from other recent projects. And I think it's not shocking that things might have gone awry. I can tell you at the end, but I know Patrick was talking about, we can always blame the high school principal because they love spending money, right? It will not be the ideal that Patrick wants. Like, we know that, right? I mean, I don't think there's anyone around the table, given the process we've gone through for the last 6 years, that is going to let that happen. Because ultimately what we need is a 50-year solution. And personally speaking, it's going to be a smaller building if we partner with the MSBA, right? If they welcome us in, it will not be a building over 200,000 square feet. So just on that alone, losing 86,000 square feet seems like a lot. But when you go into Pentucket and look at that space and move around the building, the way things are laid out are so much more efficient, so much more cost effective to operate when you're on 3 stacked stories rather than this campus that just sprawls out. And sometimes it's a 5-minute run between classes from one corner to the other. So I hear you. I totally hear you that it can become a golden goose and it's dead on arrival. And I can tell you I have spent too many years of my life thinking about this building and a solution to let it be that. Like, it can't be. And I don't think anyone on the committee that has been part of this process has any interest in that. And I think us going in eyes wide open with a designer and that we need to be driving that bus is to guarantee success. No, this is a challenge, right? I forget who I was talking to. Even if even if it's a $250 million project and 125 is paid by the state and 125 is paid locally, great. We get a brand new building for $250 million. 125 million is still a lot of money, and it's still going to take a lot of work to get our 3 towns to believe that that's the right solution. And I'm committed to that. And I think as long as we're being wise along the way, we'll have the argument of why, right? So yes, we could have renovated, maybe less, but 90,000 less square feet, it's X dollars more cost effective every single year to operate that building, right? So it's building that case. That becomes very doable if we're not designing that golden goose. Sure.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Brian. And the other, my concern is anyone who follows Facebook sees how much the auditorium is loved.
Mhm.
Our kids thrive in the dramas and the theaters and,
Yep.
you know, and then you take the two gyms, you know, potentially having a smaller gym, not having it two gyms. I don't want to lose what the kids have now. If I agree to go forward with this, it has to be better than we have today. If
So,
it's not,
sorry.
I have those concerns. I have those concerns because, you know, I have a lot of, you know, friends, kids who are in the drama. I mean, Erin Berger is working her bum off trying to rebuild the band.
Yep.
And where can they, you know, perform? In the auditorium.
Yep.
So I don't want to see us go negative thinking that we have a golden goose. It's still my concern. I don't know. I will not vote to give up that auditorium or the two gyms. I would not be behind that.
So personally, I'm not planning on giving up either one of those. I would be
Yeah.
for building a new building behind it and keeping those in and putting a lobby in front of the auditorium.
I would agree with that, Matt. And it's going to be really extremely hard, as you know. Some of you know, I sat on conservation for many years. I know a lot about wetlands. I mean, yeah, it's a town state project. We may have some leniency, but it's going to be extremely hard for us to move that building towards the wetlands.
I will say this too. So there's been work kind of outside of work with Kevin Provencher, just kind of thinking through to what Matt was saying. Matt has been playing with all kinds of, he's redesigned the whole place. He's got a solution ready to go. So what Narissa was saying with, we're hoping they let us cut corners on the study on things we can already check off as a no. I'm hopeful that they would let us, if there's a good, clear, solid no, that they would let us check that box. We still have to study all the options, but I really do think it would make for a pretty busy 2-year project. But with a 2 or 3 phased project, as Matt just said, if we kept both gyms, the auditorium, and then everything else was replaced, if we could phase and lop off that back behind the middle school gym, those 2 stories were all the performing arts rooms, and the cafeteria, and get mobile. There are modular kitchens, modular classrooms. Right, as part of that project, he had all kinds of Kevin had $4.5 million worth of modulars in this project. In modular, that if you as you're driving out someday, if you think you can kind of visualize where the middle school gym ends and then assume everything behind that in the cafeteria disappears, that back parking lot is a big space with those. So there's an opportunity to be able to say, okay, we're not going towards the wetland, we're taking existing parking and then rebuilding a space around the side and phasing, right? There would definitely be some movement, but there's a possibility there. I agree with you. There is no solution where we're moving into the fields. Anyone who's an athlete and plays on those fields knows how wet they are. We sure as heck aren't putting a foundation out there. But I think there's ways that can be engineered that allow us to keep the pieces. 100% with you, Mike. The 2 gyms is a draw. And if we, for all of our youth programs, for all of our you know, academic or our school programs, would be silly for us to give up. So that would have to be, we're going to renovate those on just local dime, fine. And then same thing with the auditorium, update it, bring it into the 21st century, would not be reimbursable, fine. But if the rest of that, you know, everything else, all those academic spaces were rethought, it would feel like a brand new building. And the 2, you know, the majority of the spaces that give us problems would be new. So I think, and that, you know, you'd kind of, you know, in my map, I was even doing, you know, with the tennis courts, if that's building, that the tennis courts go up to the parking lot, and the parking lot then kind of shifts towards between the stadium and where the middle school is now. So there are definitely ways to do that. and we can't go in with a design, they're not going to say, great, thanks for all your thinking. We'll check that box and save you $1 million. But as you know, as Diane was saying, all the thinking we've done will help inform that process. And where people get into trouble is when those who are involved with Pine Grove remember, it's easy to get around the table and start thinking and being like, oh my gosh, we could have what? And all of a sudden the price tags go through the roof. So I think we're in a very different place in our understanding, and everyone around, you know, the rest of Mike and Matt have both said, there's no one who is going to go out and over design. It's reasonable, and the MSBA would be thrilled to partner with that approach because it saves them money too, right?
Yeah.
So I
no.
have a question. I'm sorry, Mike.
Who was that? Oh, it was Alicia.
I just one more quick, Alicia, and I can let you, so I do agree with you, and I'm glad that you brought up, you know, because I also have concerns as we're working, because it seems like it's going to be a 2 to 3 year project if we're lucky. You know, it depends on supplies, demand, and everything else. The children don't feel the effect. So, you know, yeah, I was an 80s kid that had, you know, classrooms in a trailer. So, you know, just, you know, try to do our best to limit any, you know, negative impact to our children, which, you know, you already addressed. So I'm just, that'd be my other, if we're lopping half the building off, they have nowhere to go. So,
Yeah, I will say this. I agree. Being stuck in a modular that had been there for 20 years and overstayed its welcome versus a brand new modular that's brought in for, you know, 18 months during a project is very different. So I don't want to minimize that, but the modulars today are beautiful. When you're inside, some of them you think, oh my gosh, I'd take this over my current classroom. The second piece of that is if we get to that point, right, the energy is so different. Christine, remember at Pine Grove, right? As soon as you know it's coming, the vote has passed, it's been funded, the towns have approved it, and you start construction, it's craziness. It's wild. I think we had 5 different or 6 different moves, maybe 7 different moves. I know there were 9 phases at Pine Grove. Some people moved 3, 4 times. Some people moved as little as 1 time. As hard as it is, when you have movers involved, the energy at that point is so different than where we stand today in the, oh my gosh, we just need a building and I see no path to get it, versus this is happening. So there's an energy and excitement that helps significantly. It's right. The challenge is real. So in Pentucket, my daughter was graduating as it was starting to happen. My son lived through the construction and appreciated it for a year at the end with a completed building. So there's always going to be groups that don't get to experience the full building, but I do think it changes. I think the experience would not be, it would be okay. And that's got to be part of the plan, right? We have to have a good plan because we have to keep on with our core requirement, which is providing a quality education all the time, even through a project.
Yeah, and just because, you know, because a lot of these kids will probably experience that when the doors open, a lot of the kids are during COVID were in elementary school. So they already were displaced for 2 years. I just want to limit, you guys know way better than me, you guys are still chasing COVID. So let's try to do our best to limit, you know, negative impact to our students as we do this, is my concern too.
For sure. Well,
that's it, Brian. Thanks.
The 2 questions that I have is, 1, if the project is accepted into the MSBA program and we go through feasibility, is one of the alternatives to do as you just said, keep the 2 gyms in the auditorium, I'm gonna say auditorium, and build in the back? Is that something that we can do?
Everything is on the table, right?
With the MSBA partnership?
Correct.
Okay, so that's my first question. My second question is messaging. Somebody's going to have to get on top of this, and I don't know if there's another group formed already, but there needs to be a PAC formed outside of this group, because this group can't be affiliated with a PAC if it's going to pass. There needs to be some kind of a I don't know if the Triton Ed Foundation wants to get involved or something like that. I hope there's conversations there.
I
That's
just say
the-
we should not be talking about that.
Right, so that's my
One of
second
these meetings.
comment. Yeah, so I
Yes.
don't know if there is, so that's, we should not be involved in that, that's
Yep.
2. And 3, I don't know if Christine, if your town, or Mike, if your town got, notification from, the, Whittier, school district, Maureen, the town, Newbury received a letter that they had they're in the drastic phases of losing their septic system, and there's going to be some kind of, they need to replace their sewage treatment plant, and that's coming. So, that's the environment right now that's going on within our 3 towns in this whole district, is we may be faced with the dual
Yep.
building project.
Yeah, so just some clarity around Whittier. They applied again, and I know 10 of 11 communities signed an MOA that just basically says we're willing to partner with Northern Essex to consider moving the project over there. So if Whittier's welcomed in this round, they will be behind us. I think that's fair to say, right? So they have to start from scratch if they're considering partnering with the MSBA, getting other state funding, and partnering with the college. The septic, that has to be approved by the towns. So that's a forewarned, but that's similar to a project budget. It has to be approved in 2/3 of the towns, just like any other budgetary
Yeah.
item is.
So I don't know how that's going to be assessed. The letter that we've gotten did not say that. I think they're
Yeah.
still looking into.
Because
what
they
it is.
don't, right,
So-
it would come with a budget. They would have to bring it to town meeting just like they do with their regular budget. And it would be an opportunity to discuss. There is no just automatic assessment that you'll receive on that.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
So those are my comments.
Yeah, and then to your point around, and we won't have any more conversation to avoid any open meeting laws or campaign finance reform laws. So
Yeah.
this is, I guess this will be a committee for our discussion for the subcommittee. Timing wise, the work that you're talking about, Alicia, in a kind of promoting a project, we're 3 years out, right? 2.5, 3 years down the road. To your point, absolutely, right? Is if we're welcomed in, we have to start that advocacy work. And yes, Triton Education Foundation is a great partnership. So that aside,
Messaging needs
Yeah.
to come from the district and from the towns, like message that this project is coming. Not
Yeah,
how we're
and
gonna pay for it. Yeah,
well, and I mean, I don't think there's any messaging yet about a project and a cost because we don't know. So
Right.
the timing would be, if we're welcomed in on Friday, the soonest, and the hope would be that we start that window in February. By the summer, we're welcomed into feasibility. That likely kicks off a minimum of an 18-month process. So that takes us from fall of 25 through spring of 27, where we're doing all of this work that we've been doing at a grander scale, spending that, $1.8 million to study, to come up with a preferred schematic design that says, here's what we believe is the right solution. And as you said, right, anything's on the table. We have to study all options. And so that's when we would then have a number to bring forward approved by the MSBA. So yes, 100% agree with you. This committee, I guess, would be a discussion. There's no what Brian's words. If we partner with the MSBA, this committee pulls back with, I mean, certainly it's a good standing committee to talk about facilities across the district. But for this specific project, this goes from a school committee establishing a building committee, and it's the building committee that takes the reins on this.
My expectation would be that this would fold, this subcommittee, this facilities that would, the people that are on this call now, you wouldn't need this committee anymore.
Yeah, we've talked about having the committee in general to talk about just capital planning and facilities discussions across the district, and I think that's a good thing. But this discussion we're having about this campus and a construction project, yeah, that dissolves.
Okay.
Yep.
And I have to jump, so I'm sorry. All
Thanks
right,
for
but
coming.
thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Brian, can you remind the group the type of people that would be on the building committee?
Yes.
I think it's important for everyone to know because it's people, it's members from all over. There's teachers, there's parents, there were, at least for Pine Grove, there was PTA members, town officials. It's a lot.
Yes. I was just gonna pull that up, building committee, school building committee. So there is a form that we have to fill out. And there are, right, so there are have tos, and then we get to decide what we want to do. So there is a minimum requirement of the roles you have to fill on your school committee. I'm sorry, on your building committee. And I would argue that is where some other building committees went awry in not selecting a fully representative. They checked all the boxes for the what MSBA says you have to have these roles. They didn't have it be representative of the decision makers. So for us, the committee has said repeatedly, there will be school committee and representation, and there will be public officials, select board, whatever the role is, representation from all 3 member towns, right? So every town has a seat at this table and having a discussion. And then there's other roles. So the roles that we have to have an MCPPO certified person. That's an internal. The local chief executive officer for Rowley, that was Joe as the select board chair. For the district as the superintendent, I'm the CEO. You have to have an administrator or manager. That's a role. A school committee member, a minimum of 1. The superintendent, I'm the CEO. Local official responsible for building maintenance. Representative of the office authorized by law to construct school buildings. The school principal, in this case, principals, it's 2 buildings. A local budget official or local finance committee, members of community with the architecture, engineering, and then other. Right? So there's nothing that says you have to have your select board members. There's nothing that says you have to have finance committee members. Those are what we're saying. We'll fill all those roles, kind of the needs, those different functions. But we'll make sure it's representative in that there's someone at that group taking back real-time information every time the group meets. We're gonna stream them, right? We're gonna meet. It's gonna be held publicly. We're gonna have every discussion publicly and able to be reviewed afterwards. So yes, it is a very right. The downside to what we've kind of discussed here, it's very prescribed. There is definitely some money we would spend in studying that we wouldn't have to spend if we went on our own. But again, back to, I forget who mentioned it, I think Narissa, one of the boxes we have to check in that first 9-month window that we're hoping to condense to 5 or 6, is a feasibility study agreement. So you get your reimbursement rate set twice. First for feasibility. So if that really happens and we really get to start in February and we can really button it up by June, we would know by the end of June what our reimbursement rate is for that feasibility period, for that whole feasibility study. So if say it's 50, it's usually a little more concrete. If it's 50-50, the vast majority of that is reimbursable. So unlike the full project cost that would have some unreimbursable costs, if we're a 50-50 split and it's a $2 million study, we know we're spending $1 million locally. That comes out of our stabilization. So all of that is set up front. The second reimbursement is through the feasibility process. There's all kinds of extra credits we can get for if we were to design a building that is, energy independent, and we're using geothermal and solar or something where we're basically off the grid, we get extra bonus credits. So it could be, we earn an extra 5 percentage points because of the design of the building that gets added on, and then the reimbursement for the construction phase for reimbursable costs goes up. Yeah. So the building committee is I was saying the downside is very prescribed, but obviously that comes with significant benefits when they're able, right? We'll get to control, I should say this, those who sat through Pine Grove, we get to control very much what the design looks like. Yes, the designers will want to make it the perfect, everything matching color, everything. But but we get to decide what's reimbursable and not reimbursable. So we know that right up front. So as we're walking through the process, we can say we want to maximize reimbursement. Yes, maybe we are deciding that it's a kind of a combined renovation. Again, gyms and an auditorium is going to be renovated. Everything else is going to be rebuilt brand new. Great. Then all those spaces become reimbursable. So there's a lot of say, and there's a lot of discussions and a lot of meetings. Right. I see Kristen reaching for the mute.
There are a lot of meetings, so buckle up,
Yeah.
principals.
Yeah. It's wild. And again, right, I think Chris would say the same thing. It's just, it's hard. It's a wild period, but it ends up being so exciting because you know what's coming at the end for our kids for the next 50 years. So.
I just have a
Yeah.
couple comments if I could. One, part of it is the building committee. And I agree on that. That makes the projects, that's kind of enforcing it. But who you sit on the building committee is also extremely important. I would say where some projects have gone wrong is where you choose the easy people, the people who will agree with your vision and a big vision. Our school committee, for better or worse, does not believe in doing anything easy. We always go about
Here.
the hard way, right? It's like, I mean, I just say, like, nobody's worried about throwing on the extra meetings if the time is well spent. Nobody is worried about, we have people who hop on committees like this where it was like, this is above and beyond, but it's the right way to go about doing things, right? You were willing to spend your time towards this. We had 3 school committee members, 4, including Linda, who's been on most of the meetings, who have been willing to spend their time to do this because this was the right thing to do. And I think the same thing is true of the building committee. I remember going in the first time, and our policy with Triton is that when we approve anything for payment, we are looking at every single invoice that comes through. Our finance subcommittee sees every single invoice. And if any are missing, I am emailing Brian Perry and saying, I can't find the invoices for warrant number 1094. Can you please track them down for me so I can double check them? With Pine Grove, we had people's heads spinning on the contractor side because Dennis Roy from the finance committee and I from the school committee side sat down and went through every single invoice. We sat in that trailer with these huge binders and we went through every single invoice that was getting paid out on the project to make sure that it was getting done right, because people aren't worried about putting in the time or having the people who are just going to say yes because it's, fancy looking or sexy or whatever term you want to use for, the outcome. They want to do it the right way. And I think that goes a long way beyond who's MCPPO certified and who's the CEO and anything like that. It's the people that you sit on that makes it really important. I just also wanted to note Pine Grove was the same situation as the middle school, high school is right now. They said 60,000 square feet. We had 90,000 square feet there. We sort of balanced out unreimbursable and reimbursable to keep the important parts of those buildings and kept it at 90,000 square feet and just updated it to be what Pine Grove needed to be doing moving forward. It was a phased renovation. My kids were there through the entire construction period, except for summers. And you live through it, you move through it. And I can't say that their academics really suffered for any of that because it was all done intentionally. It was all planned well in advance. Sort of everybody was on board that was making it happen. And to just go back to one of your comments in the beginning, I just wanted to point this out that the regional agreement actually calls for where all of the school buildings are located. Without changing the regional agreement, we couldn't change the town that the middle school and high school is located in. And I don't believe that Rowley or Salisbury would be inclined to vote for a change to the regional agreement to move the middle school and high school into another town. Simply because, we're the only non-contiguous regional school district in Massachusetts, which means our kids travel a long way. And if you were saying, locating it in Rowley, that's making the Salisbury kids go even farther. And if you're locating it in Salisbury, it's making the Rowley kids go even farther. And a lot of them are already traveling, on a bus that's 45 minutes to begin with. My personal opinion, I don't think we could get that passed. So I think if we wanted to look at other options for land, I think the only place that we can look for it is in Newbury.
And I was gonna say, I feel like that's gonna be a box that they won't press on. They would press on available space on the campus. right? So that would be more, is it more cost effective per foot to build new versus renovating for that 50-year solution? So I don't think we'll have a huge battle about, we don't have another location. We'll have to study it. I mean, do some work on it, but I cut you off, Mike. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say, I would disagree with Narissa. We would look at it if it was, we could save millions upon millions of dollars. I think all three towns would be like, hey, if I could save $25 million and move the location, you're probably gonna hear it move the location. So,
I mean, I guess if we had to bring that to town meeting, we could bring that to town meeting, but I just don't see with the possibility of having kids on the bus more like an hour.
I
'Cause
don't
it's really
disagree with you.
2 hours every day, right? I'm
Yeah.
not sure I can see the voters going. I don't see them going for
Yeah,
that.
well, what I'm trying to say, if you're on the edge of like Raleigh, it won't go to Salisbury. We're just too far away. But if you could go on the border of Newbury and Riley, and it is actually more in Riley than Newbury, we could find a plot of land. I think, and we could save $25 million, $50 million. You're gonna hear the people say, do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think,
I
Can
don't
I
think
ask
we
a
should.
question about that? Sorry, Michael. Can I just
Yeah.
ask one question? Because we've opened regional agreement territory. Isn't
Yeah.
it 18 months-ish to change the regional agreement?
from being done with it, it's like,
Well, that's so I would just my greater concern would be that could create a very serious pause in the whole project, and not a small one, that we're not talking like a month or two. I
Mhm.
think because if I remember correctly from meetings, and Narissa, I will have to lean on you for that, but I thought it was 18 months. Sorry, now everyone's coming home. I finally unmiked.
Same thing's happening in my house.
Oh my goodness. Apologies.
you're allowed to be a parent, Caitlin.
There are so many living creatures in this house right now, and more are just adding.
They're called kids.
I have dogs too.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
And a
So,
husband.
and he just looked at me like I'm here too.
Nice.
But my greater concern would be the 18 months it would take, and that's when we actually, as three towns and a school committee, decide.
Yeah,
Do you
I
see?
will.
So that would be my biggest thing, and I get the money piece because, hey, if you can save 100 million, let's all look. But I would actually just concern, and I don't know much about the regional agreement because I didn't sit on those discussions. But when I was sitting in DCC, it was a very long process of changing it.
Yeah.
And
I
do
mean,
we have time to do that?
Yeah, I think the reality is we won't end up. I will say one of the documented, legitimate cost drivers at Whittier is that to rebuild on site is a lot of swampland. So there's a lot of work, a lot of earthwork that would justify it's 25 million more, 50 million more to save to go elsewhere. I don't think we're in that situation. It would be the phasing that might be something that adds cost for us, but I don't think, right, we know we're not building it on the fields. It's not going to happen. So it would only be, it's either a renovation or a kind of an ad reno new phased, really the only solutions. So I think we'll be able to save some time in condensing some of those decisions, especially when we say, look, the regional agreement calls for it to be here. We have to add a 2-year assumption if we're going to look at other places outside of Newbury. It's all part of the discussion. It all has to be reviewed for sure.
I'm not against it. I was just checking
Yeah.
the time frame on it. I mean, if you can save a ton of money, it's definitely worth every conversation. I just was trying to make sure I do pay attention to all those meetings. So I was like, it seems like a really long time though. And will the MSBA allow us that extra time, or would that be something that they
they can allow extensions. I think Whittier end up studying for 3 years before they move forward. So there definitely is, the board can extend things if there's a reason for it. It can happen. The MSBA, there's a lot of mechanics behind building projects that lead to increased costs. We will have a lot of control to be able to say, okay, since we can't move or something, it doesn't just have to be, right, the only solution is moving it to the the edge of Rowley and saving 50 million and keeping it here and it costing 50 million more. We'll have a far more control than that, right, unless they dig up and find nuclear waste under the building or something. I'm making it up, but
Can we not even put that into the universe?
maybe not that, maybe like an ancient burial ground or something like that, that could end up happening.
How about
Not
none of
better.
that?
Not
Don't say that
better.
out loud either. All right.
Not
Nothing bad is
just
gonna happen.
not better.
Yeah. Cause stop talking.
When they dig up the campus, they're going to find gold. Lots
Perfect.
and lots of gold, Brian. That is what we put out into the universe.
Pot full of Bitcoin. Sweet.
So, and
No.
yeah, you were right, Caitlin. It's so our last round, at least, it was Newbury was the first town meeting. They had to have the warrant proposed warrant article in March. Everything gets voted in those spring town meetings. The DESI commissioner signs by December, and then it goes into effect the following July. So it was basically like, call it 16 months.
No, I understand where you're coming from, Marissa. I'm just saying, because you're a very heavily involved Raleigh town citizen. You guys are facing some really financial crunches. And I know Raleigh and Newbury both have, Salisbury were not perfect, but we're a little bit better financially sound right now. So we have more options, but people are they're gonna be pinching every penny they can. And if they see that they can save money, they're gonna save money. That's how it's gonna go.
Yep.
So we can't, in business and in anything in life, you never box yourself in, because look what Whittier did. They boxed themselves in. And what did they get? A no vote. So we have to leave it open.
I understand that. I also think you need to be responsible, and I don't think that's a responsible decision to, I just don't think it would. I personally don't think it would pass. I think there would be so much slack from it not being a responsible decision for the futures of our kids that I don't see it passing at a vote. It's not so. I guess when I'm looking at MSBA stuff, I'm always looking at like, what's your most likely path forward, right? That was the mentality that PGS taught me. Is you're always looking like, look for your most likely path forward. What do you think can pass? What do you think cannot? And if you think that something is not going to pass, like, look for other options, because if it's even on the line, you're essentially, I don't want to say wasting time, but you're spending time that you don't have. If you're going down an avenue that's not going to be viable, likely not going to be viable. And I just don't personally see that as a path that I think it's something that could take significant time and potentially and not have a positive outcome.
I'm sitting here thinking of the structure itself, just what Matt and Brian said. We literally, I know we could mold it in, but you could take that that one way out, right? You could build all along that whole side, cut off, say where the superintendent's office, Patrick's office, somewhere in there, Brian's and Patrick's office, cut it off right there and extend towards the JV softball field. And you could build right on top of their gym. You could build on top of the auditorium. Even, on top of the cafeteria, you could extend it that way. Definitely. You definitely could do that and achieve what we need. And you'd be getting closer to the pump systems for the sewer. So you have less likely, clogs, and then you can, the upper parking lot, you could wipe out and make it into, the tennis court or something. So we definitely could do it on site. I agree with everyone on that. It just, I don't ever like boxing myself in and to basically say, no, we have to stay here. Well, can we spend like a couple meetings and have some realtors go out there and just see?
We'll have to check that box, right? If we're welcomed in, if I get that call this week and we're invited next week and we're welcomed in, we have to explore all that, right? When you enter the core program, you're agreeing to look at every possible option, because the MSBA, again, if we use a number of 200 million, if they're investing 50% of that, investing 100 million, they want to know it's the best and most cost-effective solution for the future. And to your point, Mike, we absolutely have to be worried about today's kids, but the design and all the decisions have to be kind of future looking, what is going to be right long-term. So yeah, it's there's no getting around that. There's no cutting corners if we partner. we'll have to spend some money figuring that out, and really confirming for sure.
I mean, because if you look at Whittier, right? They
Mhm.
said that was the best project they could come up with. We know now it's not.
Mhm.
Because, you know, going to NECO and moving actually where you have sewer, you don't have septic, is the better project at the end of the day.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's more viable, longer solutions, better landscape. I mean, everything is better over by NECO.
Yeah.
So they boxed themselves in, came up with a $442 million project, and everyone pretty much said no to it.
Yep.
I don't want us to fall in that same box.
Yeah, and right, the reality is even from these conversations, having town officials from all three towns have a voice into that. And similarly, if we're invited in and we have an official building committee, having town officials having a voice into those decisions real time as decisions are made means we get to the finish line. And whether it's, you know, you as town official, whoever it is sitting at the table is going back saying, I've been part of this. I don't love the price tag. No one loves the price. No, I don't care what the price tag is. No one's going to like the price tag, right? So it's a big price tag, but I can tell you this is really the best, most cost-effective solution because we've been beating this up for 2 years trying to come to the right solution. That's the right way to do it in my mind, because there's no right. I know Christine goes back and does a report at the select board meeting after these meetings, and right, people are informed. I know, Mike, you share. I mean, that's happening routinely, and that's important. And so that we continue that same process right through the whole. We don't lose any of that. When I say it's more prescribed with the MSBA, we don't lose any of our autonomy in how we make decisions and all of that. They're not making the decisions. They're just going to say no if it's not the most cost-effective decision.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail. I mean, Christine does an amazing job. I tell her every single time. She's very detail-oriented, and
Yeah.
that helps.
Yeah.
And in Salisbury, we were at the Christmas tree line last night. I probably talked to 10, 15 people about Whittier and Triton.
Yeah.
Salisbury residents, they know.
Yeah.
They know what's coming. And
Yeah.
I am very clear with them. I said, hey, I'm looking between $1,000 to $1,500 more a year in your taxes. Just between the two schools and some other capital improvements that the town's gonna have to do. I'm being very clear with them. I'm being very open with them. I go, their alternative is your children, because it doesn't matter if you're a senior or you have kids or you don't have kids. It's the town's kids. So all three of the town's kids go to these schools. And no matter if I had a kid or if I did have a kid, and you know, Ressler and Christine, and you know, everyone knows I care about all three towns' kids because we represent all of them when we come together like this. So that being said, I just want to make sure they're okay, and I think most people want that. If they look at, you know, when you go buy a car, example, right? You know, you can buy the stripped down model, you can buy the, you know, the premier model. It's up to you, right? And I think people are going to want a good school, good safe school for their kids. And I think a lot of people I talk to in Salisbury, they're ready for it.
Yeah.
They thank you. We're getting it out really early, saying, hey, this is what's coming. These kids deserve it. Just like our senior, we do a bunch of work at our senior centers. We take care of our seniors, the two most vulnerable people in our communities, all three communities, children and seniors, and none of them should ever know the burdens that we have, right? We all take our turns. So most Salisbury people know it's coming, and most of them are behind it and ready to do it.
All right. Okay, so I don't know, Matt's still here, right? So the charge of this committee for today was you are the three school committee members are reporting to the full committee next Wednesday. I'm hearing people are agreeing that at this point we put this on the shelf, not wasted time or money by any stretch, lots of good thinking here, but that if we really do get that welcome in next Wednesday or next Friday, that we would say yes and run full steam ahead with them. Is that, I don't know if the committee members want to spend time kind of talking through how you want to present that, or who's going to present that, or
I
don't know.
would, I mean, I think I guess I would appreciate hearing, because I think there's two things here, right? We need to figure out how to present, because the school committee is heard but not seen real details on sort of this entire process from start to finish. Like, we've been giving them updates, but it hasn't been to the depth that this committee, subcommittee has gone to.
Right.
Just my personal take on that, but I think we need to take them, not through the entire thought process, but talk about the, you know, the really big points that we were trying to address sort of in this Plan B design, and how those in depth sort of went into creating that plan that we have in existence, and then also taking them through the discussion that we have today. But I just want to make sure, you know, in that, you keep saying if, Brian, I'm going to say, I'm assuming from everything I've heard that we're getting an invitation on the 13th. I want to know, since we go into a school committee meeting the Wednesday following that, I think we're going to be in a position at that point to say, we've got an invite. Should we set Plan B aside and just use it for informational purposes and go for the MSBA invite? Or should we, sorry, no, it's next Wednesday. So it's the
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're
We'll
getting,
have had a call, but not had we won't have an
yes.
official invite, but
I
we'll
will
know.
be able to not make any clear statements, be able to get eye twitches,
You'll know there's a
confirm or
recommendation.
deny.
You know
Yes.
there's a recommendation.
I will know the and even that, I guess I'm not supposed to say that publicly, other than we've been invited and it's the board's decision. I will be able to share, you know, myself and the chair of the committee have been invited to attend a meeting, right? So, yeah.
Yes. I think it would be helpful to just hear from the towns and all the people on the subcommittee, just the, you know, kind of their personal thoughts on Plan B versus MSBA, where they're sitting right now, not the conjectures. Brian went down a rabbit hole about plans and thoughts that might come up down the road, but just as we're coming up into this junction and we need to decide to jump one direction or jump another direction in the very near future, sort of where each person is at on that so that we can accurately convey it. I've been trying to take notes as we go. But I think we as a subcommittee need to convey that to the main committee. And then I'll just say my other recommendation would be, after we have that conversation, and I feel like we're sort of set with this, I would recommend, I would love to table this item, and then everybody can hop off at the end of this meeting. But I think Matt, Caitlin, and I need to have a quick discussion about who's making that presentation, because we can't have that conversation offline because two of us makes a quorum. So we just need to figure out sort of a high level strategy so that one of us can carry that out going forward into the school committee meetings.
So I would say we heard from Mike his opinion on this. I know Chris is still here. Alicia, unless I'm seeing something, Tracy didn't pop on and Alicia's gone, so you won't be able to get perspective from Newbury.
So I'm in for the MSBA. I mean, I lived that experience through Pine Grove, and I know it's a far greater project up at Triton. But, you know, always in the back of my mind, it's what's the cost to the town going to be? But I think it's the right route to go is through the MSBA at this point, based on everything I heard today. I had mixed feelings coming into today's meeting, based on all the work this committee has done with Kevin and his staff. But I think in the long run, I think the MSBA is the way to go.
Brian, real quick, I'm thinking here, I know I'm way premature, but you know, me, the designer in my head, we could actually leave the kids in the classroom when we did it the way we went up, like you said, came up towards their lift station, because the kids, we literally would not be affecting any of the classrooms.
Yes, definitely getting way ahead.
I'm just thinking ahead. You threw something out in there.
I know I did. I own that rabbit. So the
the
only issue is, played with that design, we need an access road all the way around the building. And our property is just barely wider. If you're the exit road, if you're leaving with the gyms on your right, and it goes up, the grass goes up and the woods start, and there's a fence right there. So we couldn't build any further in that direction because for fire purposes and everything emergency, we have to have an access road all the way around. So, but I do think there's phasing abilities with minimal movement.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in my head, you threw something out there, so I'm already like,
Still going.
got the CAG program in my head going, saying,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you can tie that into the gym, you could do this.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think we could probably leave some of those classrooms as we do it.
Yep.
I think we could find a way to do that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the important message is, right, so we've said it several times, a partnership with the MSBA does not mean we're giving up and just saying we want the new Cadillac building. That is not. Very much so, the MSBA wants us. I can hear Jack McCarthy saying it, the former executive director. He would say, right, we are in the business of successful building projects. They don't want to get to the finish line and have it fail, right? I'm no judgment on Whittier. They don't like what happened at Whittier because it's reflecting on them as well. So if we're going through this process with town officials at the table, to Christine's point, right? The cost has to be a driving factor all the way through. And so every time we think, ooh, we need that, well then, okay, maybe we'll have it that version. We're going to get the Chevy version rather than the, Lexus version, not to pick on Chevys and Lexuses. Right. So I think I think our process will be set up, but I think we need to keep repeating that. A partnership with the MSBA does not mean we're going straight to the over-designed, overpriced projects.
And that that actually will come out through the building committee, because I remember sitting
Correct.
through those meetings where some people wanted, the Rolls Royce, and we had to go stay with the Lexus or whatever.
Yeah.
The other thing is, keep in mind, excuse me, the phasing, when they start to talk about the phasing and the moving of classrooms and so forth, if I remember correctly, Doran Whittier had like an educational planner that worked very closely with me as the principal on all of that. It's not like that has to be done separate from any other planning. It's very, very detailed, and they work with you on that. They actually come up with the plans based on the information that you give to them.
Correct. Yeah. There is very little we're doing, right?
Right.
Obviously there's staff and there's things that we'll be doing, but as far as that whole process, whether it be with modulars or doing the research, we're not, like you said, Mike, we're not sending out a couple realtors. Like, we have to actually study through the designers and their people, other locations that, so it is heavily prescribed, heavily managed. We will pay an owner's project manager. That $2 million-ish roughly we spend for that feasibility and schematic phase is largely design and then project management. So that includes the movers, right? All that stuff that's actually in the building costs, right? It's all happening. It's not us having to make those decisions. So good point.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Brian, I worked on some Triton's actually a little project, much bigger projects than that, and many not cafeterias, I say, work offices with multiple facets of different subcontractors and everything else. So yeah, the realtors was layman terms on that. So I get what you're saying on that. That was just,
I got you.
trying to go layman's terms on some things, because sometimes I geek out too much and people don't know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I think this is a solid plan. I think it's a very solid plan.
All right. So I know we don't have any Newbury representative left. I will just offer, I have had several conversations with people from Newbury and the kind of general sentiment was, if we get welcomed into the MSBA, we have to partner with them, even if you like your plan B. So I'm not going to put people's names out there, but that's been the general sentiment that I've kind of walked away with in conversations, is that it would be a hard sell to say no to the MSBA, even if it meant more time, because it means the state is paying for a portion. So
yeah, I talk to Mr. Walker regularly, as you know. As I went to school with one of his boys and the other one was older, and I totally respect Mr. Walker. I talked to Alicia and they feel the same way, exactly what you just said. And I know that. I've talked to a lot of alumni from Newbury, a lot of Byfield Newbury alumni that I'm still really close friends with. So you pretty much expressed how they have said to me. But again, the golden goose, I'm gonna go back to it. If I'm spending $175 million or $172 million, and the the MSBA says, oh, by the way, now you have to spend $300 million, I'm going with $172 million. That's just where I'm gonna vote. I have concern. I mean, I just look at Whittier and go, oh my God, the most expensive high school in America in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Are you kidding me? It should have been Chicago or New York or New York City or something, but no, it's no, I'm not. If it starts going that way, we need to put the brakes on it and figure out something else.
Yep, I'm with you.
Yeah, we could always go with our plan B down the road if it, in
Mhm.
feasibility, it doesn't make sense. I mean, we're not going to go and spend more money
Yeah,
than what
no,
it would cost to do plan B. It has to
Yeah.
be at the same amount or less.
no, I totally agree with you, Matt. We're all on the same page. Just trying to relay that remind us that we need to stay on that page.
All right. So does that give, so for Matt, Nurse and Caitlin, does that give you what you need to have to stick around and kind of get your game plan for next week?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So should we then, I'm not gonna call the meeting over, but do you wanna, if we're good with everyone else who doesn't want to stick around and figure out what the committee's gonna say next week? Thank you for being here.
Are you
Brian, just one more
another
thing.
meeting?
Oh, well, that was going to be one of my questions.
Mm.
And my other one was, there's the communication strategy item that's on the agenda. I just wanted to make sure, I'm sure you're on top of it, but I know that MSBA has all their own communication systems, but I want to make sure that we're, again, just sort of ahead of making sure we have stuff drafted and ready to go so that it's
Mhm.
it's out there.
Yep.
And I'll just raise at some point, just because I don't want to mess this up. I think at some point we need to consider possibly hiring someone to set up a communication schedule, and sort of manage making sure that that all happens, because we are all stretched super thin, and that is a piece that I do not believe we can afford to drop the ball on. And I think if we can, I have no idea how much that'll cost, but if it comes in at a point where it's reasonable, I think we have to look in that direction, because it can't be like you trying to manage 17 things, including this building project on top of it, and you're writing letters to the newspaper or, press releases or whatever. I think it has to be somebody, and somebody has to be thinking through the process of like, this is what's coming up down the road. We need to communicate it ahead of time and a week after, or whatever the situation is.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, so as far as the next meeting, I would say let's kind of indefinitely hold off with the assumption that it's going to come to fruition, that we get that invite and we're off to the races after the new year. I think it's easy to reconvene this team if need be. I think this is I will say personally, I think this is a great group. This has been very productive. So if need be, I hope it would be the same town people that show up and have the discussions. But I would say I don't think there's a need with the assumption that we get into the MSBA. I think, yes, I don't want the school committee to dissolve this indefinitely or permanently, I should say, because I do think there's a value to keep the discussion going about all 700,000 plus whatever square feet of space that we have across the district under our purview. I think that's good to have a standing committee for that. But I think for this current work, I think we can kind of just pause for the moment, schedule something later. And then for communications, I would agree with you greater than 100%, Narissa, that I think it's, short term. I know we had talked about, I haven't heard anything, but we had talked about, I had said, I'm happy to do whatever communication on behalf of the committee short term. If we're being accepted into the MSBA, that's certainly a different angle, but I think there's two paths. One is the communication with our towns that I think is much more clear, but I think should also be more than, again, Christine, great job doing those summaries. I think there also needs to be regular communication formally in writing to all, like that full DCC group as things progress. And secondarily, I don't know what the cost will be, but it will be worth every dime. I think as soon as if we move If we're welcomed in and after feasibility, we make it out of feasibility and into, I'm sorry, out of eligibility and into feasibility, and that really happens, I think at that point in time is when we're ready to start a partnership with A Communications to start developing from the very early message early messages are, we just started studying, and that becomes a root, right? A common theme all the way through. We've been talking to you for 2 years and here's the plan. I think that needs to be a full 18, 20-month strategy for sure. And it will not be cheap, right? But that has to be assumed as part of that construction, overall project cost. So.
And on a quick note, we're not gonna let their construction company or their union workers try to hijack every single meeting.
Right.
That was a little joke.
Correct. But well said.
Like, you have to open the door for that, Mike. And with
Right.
Pine Grove, we never opened that door. And,
Exactly.
That's a choice that you make.
Yeah.
And don't have them pay for their information going out either. That was, no.
Okay. So I think for everyone else that doesn't want to participate in the school committee figuring out what they're going to say, thank you.
No, we'll take off because I know Matt and Larissa and Caitlin can't shut down the meeting, but I'll take off. Thank you, everyone.
Take care,
Thanks, Mike.
everyone.
Thanks
Have a
so
nice
much.
Thanks,
holiday
Christine.
season. Have a nice holiday
Yeah.
season.
Thank you too.
Patrick and Al, you don't need to stick around either.
They've got other stuff to do.
I know, right? John, I know, John, you too. Sorry. Please, can I go? All right. So you want to
There's-
keep recording this? You can. I think so. It's a public meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is, I'll let you all discuss. I think to your point, Narissa, I think it's important that it's both an update on everything we've done as well as what we spent 2 hours talking about today. Because it'd be very easy to just kind of quickly skip to that, the newest information, and it negates the $30,000 we spent. And right, the message is, and I firmly believe it, that was not wasted money. I mean, the thinking and the thought and the kind of the concepts that came out of that will potentially be very informative. That's not the right word, right? Very telling for for our ultimate design that we end up with. So.
I mean, I don't know who has free time between now and then, but I think, I don't know, my personal take is that, there needs to be sort of some background on the discussions that led there, just, hitting the high points on like talking about security when it came to entry points into the building and what happens during events and bringing, all the academics into the building so that it's not kids walking out a back door and then walking back in after their period, and talking about, student flow and updating all the elements. And then, I mean, that's essentially what leads to 7.1. So I think it's a walkthrough of this is how that was envisioned as our plan B. And then, it's going to be hard to represent, I think, all of the conversation that came here today, but maybe there's like I don't know, maybe it's like a pro cons list or something like that. Just talking about like why one versus the other, things that people sort of presented here today. And then I think it's probably worthwhile having sort of I have notes on, maybe Nicole's are even more detailed than mine, just on some of the quotes that the town officials gave for their part in backing it. And I know that, they don't officially have a vote here, but I think it's important to sort of carry those forward to the full committee so that they, kind of have a direct understanding of what people left with today, where they were.
How are you envisioning that as like
I mean, maybe it's literal slides so that
That's what I
nobody's
was thinking.
doing a
I'm
ton of
thinking like there's no other way
talking.
to do this where there's not a visual representation, because I think a lot of this was
Yeah.
visually done when we're looking at those schematics and then saying like, well, no, this needs this, that can't be what that. That's why I'm working through
Yeah.
it, because there's no easy way to present 2 to 3 hour meetings over the course of.
Well, I think some of it's easy, right? Because
Yeah.
the words black box theater don't even need to exit our mouths during that discussion.
Yeah, I think you keep it, I
You
think you
skip
keep it
straight to
high and where you
7.1.
landed. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. I think
Well,
the
it's, I
fo-
want us like, how detailed do you want to be? I just think we bring up the 4 main themes that everyone in this committee agreed upon.
Yes.
And those, and this is where the discussion started. And there
Yeah.
were 7 iterations to where we think we've got a safe, well encapsulated building that provides for our students in these other 3 ways. And then kind of go into those quotes maybe and say like at 7.1, this was the feedback. And when MSBA came forward as a legitimate option,
Yeah,
this was the reason to go that way instead of 7.1.
I think Matt should present it.
I was going to vote for Matt, but then I always vote for someone else to present.
Yeah, I don't mind presenting. I mean, I think it's basic. We just need to present the what we came to 7.1, how we came to it very briefly, and I would probably give the cost estimate.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's an important piece of it, right?
yeah, so I
But
think
high
that,
level, not
yeah,
detailed.
that 6-page PDF goes to the committee. Right?
Yeah. It can be an
That's it.
attachment ahead of time.
Yeah, we can post it with the agenda.
I think
I
it
would
has.
probably. Sorry,
Tron? No, you first.
I was going to say we should definitely say 172 million, but I don't know that I would give the detail for people to break down and talk about for the next 8 months.
I mean, I think you throw it in as an attachment because it's been everywhere else as a. It's hard to close the door,
Already on
right?
the, yeah, it's actually
Yeah.
already on our agenda.
I was
It
going to
doesn't
say it's
matter.
already out, right? It's still a
Exactly.
public meeting.
Um,
Anyone who's cared has been able to find it.
Yes.
And I think there's a balance of you spent $30,000, that you did get a product,
Yes.
that it was 6 months of work, and that we did get a written report. I would just say, I don't know if there's a cover memo that you want to put on this. Or is it language in the posting that speaks, that somehow kind of crafts?
That's why
So
I was
people don't-
wondering if it's a presentation because I'm always big on, kind of teach the high points
Mhm.
because you need somebody to be able to reiterate them down the road. So if you
Yeah.
can give them, 3 bullets on what you were intending to do and 3 bullets on how that was fulfilled and 3 bullets on why you went in the direction you did, that's can be incredibly helpful. And that's basically what happens in a slides presentation. And it's something that people can look back to. I don't think that's a bad thing to have attached to the agenda along with that and have, presented it's something that Matt's talking to and obviously giving more detail, but just have those high points so that people can go back and say, oh, what were the 4 points that they were trying to address? Great.
Yeah, to that I would say, if you're gonna create a slide deck, link this right in the slide deck.
Yeah.
So that you can't get this without looking at the slides, right? So I'm on page 1, I'm on page 2, I'm on page 3, and then there's a link. Here's a final proposal, but you got there
Yeah.
not by just being able to pull this up. And I might be thinking particular people who would do that. Yeah.
I'd like it put in the minutes that I just called Brian devious.
Yeah, because it was understated. But
Oh, I didn't hear that. I must have talked right
did.
over you.
You
So it
did.
actually didn't really happen if I didn't hear it. But no, it's not right. It's not that
No,
it's
no, no,
hideous,
no.
right? It's just you can't take this. It's kind of
Right.
our same budget discussion where we've stopped
own.
putting out documents in October, November because people take it as gospel, and I was like, no, it was formative.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
yeah, I think of slides, and it doesn't need to be a 20-slide deck,
No.
but a simple handful of slides, half a dozen, 6, 8 slides.
And then are we looking for pros and cons with going with the MSBA?
I mean,
I don't know if I'd list them as pros and cons. I would say, you know what Warren Advisory does? We had a unanimous vote
Yeah.
I wouldn't give pros and cons because you don't want people to pick apart a con as a pro or pro as a con.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think Narissa had it correct. Like the pros and cons were talked about in this meeting and in meetings previous. It was the decision of the building subcommittee that going with the MSBA is the best move forward. If you want to list the reasons why, you just go back to those 4 reasons. It hits all those points. 172 million is a big number.
Yeah, I think
know,
it's right.
I would-
It's the price point is the real deciding factor there. Yeah.
Matt probably did the math before me, but even if they only reimburse 30%, that brings us back down to the number before they added in the HVAC.
It's in between a little bit.
I thought it was
I'm
122.
saying, I'm saying 250 million, 82 million
Yeah.
reimbursement. I mean, it's close. It doesn't. 172 doesn't work.
I can't use the calculator on my phone anymore since the update, so I was trying to do it in my head.
Either way, 150 was probably right, the high end of what we could have. I thought that was doable with those elements, but once you get to 172, you either have to eliminate some of the pieces that we really prized, right? Or you go with that higher number and hope for the best. And
I honestly at 122 didn't even care about the MSB and either, if it happened, great, but if it didn't, we could really do well and create something valuable. At 172, I was like, I'm really hoping the MSBA makes a phone call because I don't know if we can.
Well,
Yeah.
right. So if you do the math, I think we could easily get it to 40% reimbursement, right? I think a third is very protective, conservative. But if I think we'll come in the vicinity of 50, I think we can get some bonus points with the design. So if we're 50 plus, I really do. I think even going back to Pine Grove, the amount that was reimbursed, there was a lot of things we could have done. And I think, right, so we did the extended learning areas so they'd be reimbursable. We're going to just lose square footage here, right? I mean, if we're doing what I think is the real best solution is keeping gyms and auditorium and rebuilding around that new construction. I mean, if the gyms are, I mean, I think the total Pentucket's 200,000. So if we're adding 150,000 on top of the gyms, in the auditorium, and then we're renovating those on our own dime, it's not that the whole thing becomes unreimbursable, right? 9,000 square feet of the gym would be reimbursable. HVAC would be reimbursable. So I really do think that we would have the ability to start value engineering right at the get-go with everyone at the table. And I think we set that scene with the discussions over the last 6 years. So I think there's no way it doesn't cost significantly less than 172 to partner with the MSBA. Even if we ended up with similar design. So.
Yeah.
Plus, yeah, and then we gain a smaller roof size. I mean, all the things that we really wanted to gain.
Huge. Right? I mean, I know Kevin, part of that is he thinks we would end up with all electric, and I don't probably for the future. That certainly, I don't know if I want to do all electric if we're not talking about solar on the roof, or something else that makes it sustainable. Geothermal. I mean, yeah, there's incentives and there's a lot of ways that we can kind of knock down that number by designing a brand new building. So
I think the important message is whatever comes down the road, we're sort of all on the same page that this is what we need to, even to Mike's point, right? If you end up at a plan B down the road, I think we're going to end up in a time crunch. Didn't want to, like that's a rough thing to look at after going through a full MSBA process. But like this is the first path I think that we all need to consider. I think, Caitlin's idea of saying like, we're all in agreement is not bad. And I think then if if Matt's talking about, giving the narrative, I guess, as part of it, I don't think it's a bad thing to have Mike's quote that it was a solid plan, or Christine's that, she thinks we should go in through the MSBI. Like, I don't think those are bad quotes to just have as part of the narrative that's sort of laying on top of that PowerPoint presentation when he's giving that in the in the meeting.
And I think continually reiterating that a partnership with the MSBA does not mean we're designing the Cadillac, right?
No.
That all this, I keep saying this, all this work we've done is going to inform that entire process and decisions. We'll get to drive that bus. We're not as helpless as some other officials of recent projects made it sound like they were.
I'm all in for the yoga studio.
Right.
I was going to say that, but I didn't want to bring it up.
Sorry.
Do we want to talk about how big your office should be?
I was just
Brian,
gonna
or-
say, I feel really confined in here. I was looking for like a seating area.
You need like 3 bathrooms.
We're still recording? We're still recording. Sweet.
Mhm.
Sorry, my dogs are going now. But yeah, I think, are you good with putting this together, Matt? Or are you,
Yeah, and I'll run it by Brian if that's okay.
Yeah,
I think this is viable, and I don't think it has to be, I'm envisioning like 15 minutes maybe, I think is doable, and then let the committee have their own discussion. But I mean, I think to this point, like, I think you said it earlier, Brian, we can't skip over the old thing because, I shouldn't say the old thing, but the process piece of it, like everything we went through before today's meeting, because the school committee needs to have their own decision essentially, like they all need to be on board with the direction we're going in, and without that historical information, you can't get to a decision.
yeah. Yeah, and I think communication from the 11th forward, I don't think there's an issue, right? It's not the work you're doing at the moment on this screen is the subcommittee work. So 2 of you as a quorum. If the 3 of you got together for, with Linda to talk about communication for the full committee on this, that's not then breaking a quorum at that point. So I think that you tell me how you want me to be part of that communication. We can draft things, we can whatever, but I can chat with you and Linda about that, Marissa, as the chair and vice chair without breaking any meetings.
That is true. How many ways can we arrange 9 people to not make a quorum?
That's right.
Always the question. Okay. Are we good?
Okay. Well, thank you all.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Oh, roll call vote. Marissa,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Thank you very much.
So Matt, let me know if when